The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. Welcome to this episode of Disrupt Education. I have on the line Elliot. Elliot, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I run a website called Lunacy Now. Until recently, I worked for an organization that countered Islamic extremism, and I did a lot of deep research into the causes of extremism and what's really going on with why people do things like mass terrorist attacks and joining radical political movements and things like that. And what I found was that the root of a lot of these problems are to do with a sense of alienation, a sense of disenfranchisement, and a sense that people can't cope with the rapid pace of change that's going on in the West today. So I wanted to do something a little more positive and upbeat and less writing about bombings all the time. As you can imagine, I got a little emotional. And so I started my own website called Lunacy Now, which is trying to focus on, we have a lot of political divides. We have a lot of technological change. We've got mass immigration. We've got cultural shifts that we never even thought were possible. Happening in a very short pace of time, and that's putting a lot of stress on society. So rather than thinking, what's causing all these problems? How can we dig into stopping things, which is framed in a negative sense? I wanted to focus on what can we do instead. How can we lift people up? How can we look holistically at what the next phase of civilization is going to look like? And really acknowledge to ourselves, things are never going to go back to the 50s, right? They're just never going to be. And anyone who says different is either lying or delusional. But at the same time, this idea that we're going to tear all of Western civilization down and build a kind of communist utopia is also, in my opinion, ludicrous. You only have to look at the body count of the Soviet Union and China and other places to see that communism is never going to work. So I wanted to take an honest look at what can we do instead? What are we going to do? And a lot of that comes down to education. It comes down to taking ownership of your own place in the world and really thinking honestly about where you are as a person, where you are as an individual, where you are as part of a society, and where you want to go, where you want to be headed. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is because we're living in a time when people have unprecedented access to information and unprecedented control over what information they consume and what information they ignore. And I don't think people have really conned on to that yet on a mass scale of how much the internet and this access to information has really changed our lives. So I want to help people get access to information, figure out what they want to do for themselves, look realistically at the options, and kind of take ownership of their own lives in building the kind of future that they want to see, given that the old paradigm is really gone.
Right.
That makes sense.
No, that's the greatest. That's where we come in at Disrupt Education, right? And you've had some very good blogs. Where can people find you online, by the way?
It's www.lunacynow.com, and I'm on Twitter.
Awesome. And you have written quite a bit about that change of education and what that looks like. I wanted to talk to you about just two topics, and the first one being is how people are now taking that lifelong control of their own education. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of this comes down to access to resources. Right. Until recently, people kind of had to go to university to get access to information because that's where all the libraries were. You go to a major university and you get a library card. You have access to all these incredible books. That changed a bit in the later 20th century. You have public libraries. People do have access to books, but you don't have the same mass access to whatever you want, whenever you want it. in terms of raw information. Now we can access pretty much any book you want, any lecture you want. University lecturers are now uploading their courses online, which is a huge game changer. So you had to go into an institution and submit to the kind of gatekeepers of education in order to get one. That's changing. And what we're seeing now is a lot of people saying, okay, well, college is increasingly expensive. Other forms of education are expensive. And the world is changing so fast that unless you're going to take ownership of your own education journey and say, all right, well, I'm not going to go into a school and just let them spoon feed me, let them teach me. I have to take ownership of my own learning journey and decide what I want to learn and go out there and learn, which is more of an internal mindset shift. Mm-hmm. Now, for any professors or whatever colleges who are listening to this and saying, yeah, obviously that's what we wanted from you all along. That's what college is meant to be about, training people to have that dedication to lifelong learning. Yeah, 100%. College is very beneficial, and a lot of the professors work extremely hard. I'm not trying to bash college in any way. But taking ownership of your lifelong journey means being able to see it as a process, and seeing college as just one step in that process, seeing high school as one step in that process, and not thinking that your education ends, at 21 or 22 or 25 when you finish your master's, or 30 when you get a PhD. Right. Not that I don't have a master's or a PhD, but people think of it in these terms, right? It's like, oh, I'm in education, or I'm in the workforce. It's like, no, you're in education all the time. You should be learning every day. Something we talked about before, Peter, is different cultures have a different attitude to education in this respect. In Jewish culture, there's an idea that you should set daily time for study, right? It should be at least 20 minutes. People who are really holding, as we say in the community, are studying for an hour a day, right? People will get up at dawn, pray for half an hour or something, and then they'll sit there and study for like an hour before going to work, and then work a full day, and everything. And that's really a cultural thing, which I think is one of the explanations behind why Jews have been so successful. I mean, I don't think you can look at the achievements of the Jewish community and think like, oh yeah, nobody will ever say Jews are lazy, Jews are stupid, Jews don't work hard, Jews don't know what they're talking about. And maybe they say other things, but they never say that. I know this is true also in other communities. The South Asian community is very well educated. The Chinese community as well has a very strong emphasis on education. But it's not something that we see so much in the white Christian community. Just the community in the West is like an emphasis of like, you should be studying all the time. You should be committed to it, and it's and there's prestige associated with it, and there's it's respectable to sit there.
We had the conversation about going into, obviously I'm a high school teacher. My wife is a primary teacher. Do you see that shift of starting to, I'm not sure it's an intrinsic piece or something of that nature, where you can teach younger students to start to see that learning is lifelong, that you do have to take control of your own education? Do you see that coming into the curriculum? Or what are your thoughts on that? Because I felt like exactly what you were saying in college. That's where I was like, oh, okay, I got to take control of this. Actually, right now, I'm trying to figure out how do we get our students into a value mindset where, they bring value to their own education earlier. What are your thoughts on that?
So Dr. Jordan Peterson has a program, the Future Authorship Program, where he talks about this, and he takes people who are maybe flagging in their education and tries to walk them through a psychological process of why it's a good idea to care about your education. I don't know how possible it is to do at high school level or for teachers to do. I'm not a high school teacher. I think a lot of it depends on the parents and depends on the cultural framework that the kids are operating in. If all their peers are playing Game Boys and their PlayStations and everything, and their parents are happy with B's, happy with C's, the way I was raised, a B is a bad grade. You understand, like, I'd be in trouble. or at least, called to account, like at the dinner table, like, yeah, okay, like what's this? Like, why are you getting these bad grades? Whereas I feel like in other households, maybe a B is a good grade, and they'd be like, oh, well done, rather than like, can you push it? Can you do better? So I think a lot of it comes down to the cultural attitude that the parents have towards education. If they have books in the house, if they have conversations at the dinner table about philosophy and about higher order thinking, and about whether or not I don't know, literature. This I'm picking stereotypically intellectual things here, but
right.
But you get the point. So I think part of it's to do with that, and I think part of it is building people up with the mindset that they really can do it. I know that a lot of people from poorer backgrounds struggle, even if they do get into higher quality universities or higher ranked universities, because they feel like they don't really deserve to be there, and they feel like they don't belong, and that they can never really make it. And this kind of internalized self-hatred, or internalized
just lack of confidence.
Lack of confidence,
right,
can have a really huge impact. I think that's something I found also when I was writing about extremism, is that there's for some of the second generation immigrants, there's like a sense that they don't fit and that they don't belong, which and that people are out to hold them down, which maybe is true to a certain extent, but also a lot of it isn't true, and it's in their minds. It's a perception that they don't belong and that they can't succeed, rather than a reality. And having that mindset shift is really crucial. I don't know to what extent teachers in high school can really foster that. I guess it depends on the school. I know that in a lot of places the resources are really overstretched. The high school where my wife went in Texas, there's 5,000 kids in the school.
Yeah.
That's completely insane. My high school was 700 people, the whole school, from age 7 up to 18. And names and thank God it was a great school, but you had that level of individual care and attention, whereas in a bigger school like this, people can really fall through the cracks, just because the volume of people makes it impossible to pick everyone up, you know. So that's why I say I think it's the cultural shift is more important, rather than any extra training or whatever for teachers. I also think that a cultural shift in the way teachers are treated. You must have heard the expression, those who can do, those who can't teach.
Right. Too many times.
That's toxic. It's really toxic. And the fact that people think that way about teachers is just part of a broader kind of resentment towards resentment is the right word, I don't know, of education in the current culture, where really education is only seen as valuable if it's vocational, and if it leads directly to a higher paying job. Otherwise it's seen as like, why are you wasting your time on this crap?
Well, let's then shift gears then, because you mentioned something very interesting about how a lot of online a lot of colleges have released their curriculum online and different things like that. Let's jump into like a look at the alternatives to college, or even alternative ways to go to college. What are your thoughts on that? What are your findings there?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I've been researching this for several months now, because first of all, full disclosure, I did go to college. I had an amazing time. I think that college can be really, really valuable for a lot of people. My teachers were amazing. I'd like to shout out to Professor George Southcombe in particular. If he's listening, he was incredible. He really helped me a lot. But I don't think it helps everyone, and I think there's a lot of people who are kind of being railroaded into going to college when it's not necessarily the best choice for them, and they come out with a lot of debt and not a lot of options, not a lot of career options. Right. Especially if they do something like a humanities degree, like sociology. Again, I did history. So there's two things. One is you can get a lot of the quote unquote intellectual learning anyway without necessarily having to go to college. So a lot of colleges have posted their courses online. If you want to do a course on, the history of the modern Middle East, well, there's one up there from a professor in Columbia, Professor Richard Bulliett. He has his whole lecture series freely available online. I just did one from a professor at Yale whose name escapes me, on the history of the early Middle Ages. Those are just two that I've done recently. But there's thousands and thousands of courses. A really great resource called Open Culture, which everyone should check out, which just is a directory of thousands of courses that you can take right now for free online. So, you're driving to work, you can have it on. You're cooking dinner, you can have it on. You can maximize your dead time. By dead time, I mean time where you're doing something else, but it's a kind of boring, monotonous task. And you really could fill it with something intellectual, something stimulating, something that empowers you and is a growth thing to do. So, you're waiting in the dentist, you're at the bus stop, you're washing the dishes, whatever it is. You can use that time for your own benefit. So there's that, and that's so that's part of it. And I want to make a distinction here between vocational and just intellectual education.
Yeah.
I guess I think intellectual education is beneficial regardless of its financial utility. I don't think I have to make that point to you, Peter, because you're a teacher, and obviously you would agree. But a lot of people don't see it that way. And to them, I would say that training your mind to think in a lateral way, in a strategic way, in a complex way, is going to benefit you in your career down the line, even if you don't see the results immediately, just because of the mental discipline and the agility that it produces. That does, of course, have to be matched by action in the real world. We all know the stereotype of the kind of borderline homeless adjunct professor, right, sitting in his one-bedroom flat, surrounded by books, but he can't hold down a 9-to-5, right?
Right. That's a great visual, by the way.
Right, you know what I mean. Everybody knows that guy, or at least knows of that guy. He's eating ramen noodles. He knows all about Proust, but he can't load an Excel spreadsheet. That's too far the other way. And so but I do think that Proust and stuff is valuable. And we shouldn't just dismiss it. But you can learn about that without going to college. The other thing is vocational things. There's a lot of courses on coding. There's a lot of courses on, you can do business courses. You can do digital marketing courses. You can do courses in data analysis. You can do language courses. Something I would recommend to everyone is to download a language app on your phone and start learning a second language. It doesn't really matter what second language you learn. It's just a great discipline anyway. If you're in the southern half of the United States, probably Spanish. If you're in Europe, either another European language like French or German or Arabic would be a good shout. If you're interested in business and everything and getting ahead, Mandarin.
So how then? So when we go through these courses online, right? How important then, or how much more or less important does the actual piece of paper mean anymore? The diploma.
So there's an outfit called 517, which is a kind of a venture capital fund, but they have a magazine, and they released the new 95 Theses on education. Highly recommend reading that to anyone. And one of the points on there was to say that Harvard could easily expand and open 10 times more schools and teach 10 times more students, but they don't. Why? Because they're not in the education business, they're in the luxury watch business. The purpose of the Ivy Leagues of Oxford, of Cambridge, is not to educate the most number of people, it's to perpetuate and educate an elite. That is the purpose of those institutions. That's what they were built for. It's what they've been about for hundreds of years, and it's what they will remain being about. And that's fine. You've got to have an elite. So the piece of paper is valuable insofar as it signals that you're in the middle class. I think it's valuable for that. But if you're already in the upper middle class, I don't know if the piece of paper is necessarily so valuable. For a lot of things, it is valuable. For a lot, the thing is the piece of paper proves that you can stay on track and that you can work at something for 4 years or 3 years in the UK and pass a series of exams and do as you're told and think critically about things. It's useful as a way of demonstrating that commitment to learning and self-discipline and stuff. Because depending on the college and the degree, obviously, but college isn't a complete joke. I mean, they do require you to do some work every now and again.
Absolutely. A lot more these days, actually.
Yeah, I don't know what the trajectory has been over the past century of how much work you're really required to do. I have no idea, but I do remember doing some work at college. So it does prove that. I think it is really valuable for a lot of people. It can be really valuable. I just think that there's other ways of it depends what you're trying to signal. I guess that's my point. It depends what you're trying to signal. If you want to signal, I am a person who can read those books, can get through the exams. I'm competent. I'm hireable. Then yeah, it can be useful. But I think that I don't know if you're going to get the return on investment, especially with the prices the way college is here in the United States. I only paid about £20,000 for my education, but I still haven't been able to pay it back.
Right.
That's not even that much money. And I went to college like 8 years ago or something like that. I graduated, and I just still haven't been able to pay it back.
Right.
And my earnings have not been enough to get now. All right, so I made different choices. I didn't go into management consultancy or finance, and that's a decision that I made. I didn't want to. But for a lot of people, there's going to be very, very serious problems with paying it back. As far as alternatives go, I've seen a lot of people building other things. I know you had Isaac Morehouse on here? No.
Katie, Discover Praxis.
You had Praxis on here, right. And from what I've seen of Praxis, I haven't spoken to them personally, but from what I've seen, just for people who don't know about them, they are essentially an apprenticeship, a modern apprenticeship, and you go and work in a startup and you build your skills. And you then go into an internship, and it's like on-the-job training, and you actually get paid for that time. So even though you have to pay upfront tuition, you close out your time at Praxis ahead.
Right.
Financially. And from what they've been saying, and from what I've read about them, and from what their graduates are saying, everyone seems pretty jazzed about what they're doing, and they are putting people in the workforce with the skills they need to succeed in a way that the universities are not.
Right.
And that's incredible. Also, there's a school called Lambda School, which is really turning people's lives around, and giving people. It's free coding tuition. It's a coding boot camp, and you don't pay them until you're earning over $50,000 a year. So they have a massive incentive to make you succeed. They've just opened in Europe. And they are exploding with growth, really, really fast growth. Then check them out, Lambda School, LAMBDA.
Yes.
And yeah, that's another institution which is coming in to take on the colleges and say, listen, you don't have to go. Right, there are other options. So as someone who thinks college is a good idea for some people, I'm very excited to see these other options coming out. Because it puts more pressure. It does two things. First of all, it puts more pressure on colleges to shape up and pick up their game a little bit. And secondly, it takes people out of college who shouldn't really be there.
Yeah.
And it's going to just leave people who really will benefit from that system.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me finish up then on one question for you. So I have many students who are 16, 17, 18 years old. A lot of them, are being funneled into the college path, but a lot more are starting to ask those questions. I wanted to ask you, what would be something of advice that you would give a 16, 17, 18-year-old right now who's in the realm of education and learning?
So I'll say what I said to my brother. He's 19. and he did a certificate to become a bartender, and he's now in Australia traveling. Unless you can get into a top 5% school, don't go. That's it.
Yeah.
Unless you can get into an Ivy League school or Ivy League equivalent, it's not worth the money. Don't go. You'll be competing with people who've done better than you and who have better grades than you. And everything that your piece of paper signals, there will be other people with other pieces of paper that have a better signal power than you. Any employer is going to hire someone from Princeton rather than someone from Arizona State. Actually, is Arizona State a good school? Maybe it is. I don't know. Whatever. I just picked that school at random.
Right.
If you're from Arizona State, don't get offended. You know what I mean? Like, go down the list, and unless you can get into a school that's in the top 10, top 20, don't bother.
Right. What do they do then?
What do they do then? That is the $1 million question.
Yeah, right.
I know a lot of people recommend starting a website, things like that. Writing. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to be in tech, then I would just say go to Lambda School or start one of these other tech programs. Learn to code. Find someone who can teach you how to code. That's going to be really good for you. If you want to get into writing and stuff like media, things like that, I think you're probably going to be better off just like starting your own website, writing, trying to connect with people. Doing internships at different companies, things like that, building some experience. If you really don't know what you want to do, if you've got the money for it, just travel. There's also the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, working your way up the corporate ladder thing. I don't know if that's possible anymore. I really think it depends. If you do, caveat. I would say that only applies, the don't go only applies if you're going to do something, just if you don't know what you want to study. If you want to be like an engineer, or you need to acquire like hard skills which are going to be valuable for you which are going to lead directly into a job in like robotics or tech or something like that. You're going to do computer science, then biochemistry or something like that. Then do go, because you can't really learn that just from reading books and listening to lectures online. But
getting involved in something is what we're really looking at.
Do something.
Yes, right.
Do something. Don't just and take control of your education. Start doing courses online. You can start taking college courses online at 16, 17.
Right.
The Praxis people said something. It's if college is a signal, you have to build a better signal, become so good that they can't ignore you. What it's about is building skills, developing yourself, and then putting yourself out there to connect with people and and find work that way. And yeah, it's freaking hard. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh yeah, I've got it all figured out and I have the answers for what they should do. People are coming into a very dicey marketplace here, right? There's not the old systems. It's not like you could just join a company at 18 and then like work for them for 50 years and then you get a gold watch for your glorious years of service and you'll play golf until you drop dead. Like that world doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
There's no stability. We're in the gig economy. People are like Ubering to make rent money on the side. Even people with good jobs, can't make ends meet.
Right.
The middle class is getting squeezed like it's really never been squeezed. Housing is through the roof. Wages have been flat for 30 years.
Right.
The economy allegedly is good, but I haven't seen any of it.
We're always looking. Look, Elliot, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on Disrupt Education. You bring in so many great viewpoints. Again, it's lunacynow.com. That's where people can find you.
Yeah, lunacynow.com.
Lunacynow.
Twitter.
Yeah.
And like I say, I'm not trying to be prescriptive about what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explore alternative options, right?
Yes.
So if I get one takeaway, college can be a good option, but just think carefully about it first and make sure that whatever you do, you've picked it intentionally, and that you're in control of your own future rather than you're just in someone else's funnel. Because if you're in someone else's funnel, it's not necessarily going to get you to a good place, because those funnels were built at a time when they worked, and the background conditions that created those funnels have all changed.
Yes, absolutely.
So the funnels are no longer necessarily going to get you where you need to go.
Right.
So you have to take ownership if you want to succeed.
Wise words. Thank you so much for being here. We
Thank
appreciate
you,
it. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you on Disrupt Education.